My mom handed my sister $18,000 from the account I'd set up for my son's college fund. She needed a fresh start, Mom said. You're a man. Figure it out. I didn't raise my voice. I sat down, opened my laptop, and said, "So did I." I filed the police report at 11:03 a.m. By noon, my sister's car was being towed. Christmas Eve was already loud when my mom clinked her glass and said, "Before we do gifts, I have an announcement." Everyone leaned in like it was going to be some sweet family moment. My sister, Melissa, was sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand, smirking like she already knew what was coming. My son, Noah, was on the floor building a little tower out of candy canes, careful and quiet the way he always was around my side of the family. He was 8. He still believed adults meant what they said. Mom smiled at the room and held up an envelope like she was presenting a prize. "This," she said, "is to help Melissa get a fresh start." People clapped. My aunt said, "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." Melissa stood up and did a little wave like she was graduating. Then my mom looked straight at me, the smile still on her face, and said the part that made my stomach go cold. "And Christopher," she added, "thank you for setting that account up. It was so generous of you." I blinked. My hands went numb around the paper plate I was holding. "What account?" I asked. Even though I already knew, Mom didn't miss a beat. "The savings account. The one for Noah's college fund." The room didn't go silent right away. It was worse than silence. It was confusion, then a few nervous laughs, like maybe they misunderstood. I stared at her. "That account is in my name." Mom's smile tightened. "It was for family Melissa needed it more. You're a man. Figure it out." Noah looked up at me like he could tell something was wrong, even if he didn't understand the words. Melissa shrugged, like she was bored. "I told you I was drowning," she said. "Mom did what a mom does. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a fist on the table. I just felt my throat close. And I tasted something metallic, like I'd bitten my tongue. I set the plate down very carefully, because my hands were shaking. Then I sat down at the dining table, pulled my laptop out of my bag, and opened it like I was at work. Mom watched me, still smiling like she expected me to pout, and then calmed down. I looked at her and said, "So did I." At 11:03 a.m. the next morning, I filed the police report. By noon, my sister's car was being towed from her apartment complex. That was the first time in my life my family looked at me like I was a stranger. And honestly, it was also the first time I felt like myself again. I was Christopher, 36, financial analyst. I lived 2 towns over in a small house I'd bought after years of being careful. Noah was my whole life. His mom wasn't in the picture anymore, and I didn't talk about that much because people like to turn it into gossip. It was just me and my kid and our routines. I packed his lunches. I stayed up late labeling school forms. I watched him do math worksheets at the kitchen table while I answered emails for work. I wasn't flashy. I was steady. That steadiness is exactly why my family treated me like an ATM with a pulse. It started small, the way these things always do. When Dad's truck unexpectedly needed repairs, I covered the $600 bill. When Mom said her meds were so expensive, I set up automatic payments. When Melissa just needed help for 1 month, I paid her rent. 1 month turned into 3. 3 turned into until she found her footing. She never found her footing. She found excuses, and every time I tried to set a boundary, my mom would say the same line like it was holy scripture. Family helps family. What she meant was, Christopher helps everyone, and no one asks him how he's doing. Noah was always an afterthought, not in big ways at first, in small cuts that added up. They'd forget his favorite snacks when we came over. They'd buy gifts for the other kids and hand him a generic toy still in the pharmacy bag. They'd take family photos and say, "Oh, he can jump in the next one," and then never take the next one. Noah didn't complain. He was the kind of kid who tried to earn love by being easy. That made me angrier than if he'd screamed. 2 years ago, after one too many moments like that, I decided I was going to protect him in the only language my family respected: money, paperwork, and clean lines. I opened a separate college fund account for Noah, not a flashy one. Just steady automatic transfers, a little each paycheck, extra on bonus months, and because my mom had spent my whole life acting like she was entitled to my bank statements, I made one mistake. I let her help. She'd been nagging me about it for weeks. "Let me see," she said. "I just want to make sure it's set up right. I don't want Noah to suffer because you missed a form." I should have known. I should have heard what she wasn't saying. So I let her come over. I let her sit at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, tapping her nails on my laptop like she owned it. I let her watch while I did the setup. And when the bank asked if I wanted to add a trusted contact for emergencies, she leaned in and said, "Just put me. I'm his grandmother." It sounded harmless. It sounded like family. It wasn't. Over the next year, she asked for little favors more confidently than ever. "Can you spot me $200 until payday? Melissa's behind on daycare. Can you help? Your father's health insurance is ridiculous right now." Every time, the guilt came with a smile, and every time, Noah's presence in the room meant nothing. My kid could be sitting right there coloring, and Mom would still talk like my money belonged to her first. Then Melissa's fresh start became the newest family religion. Melissa had a pattern: blow up her own life, cry, and wait for someone to carry her out of the wreckage. She quit jobs because her boss was toxic. She stopped paying bills because money anxiety was real. She wrecked friendships and said people were jealous. She always landed back on my parents' couch, and somehow I was still the one expected to fund her comeback story. Last fall, Mom asked me to co-sign a loan for Melissa. I said no. I didn't say it mean. I didn't lecture. I just said, "I can't. I have Noah to think about." Mom stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You have a good job," she said, like that was an argument. "I also have a child," I said. Melissa stormed out of the room, crying loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She slammed the door and my dad called me cold. For weeks after that, the little slights at family events got sharper. They'd talk about real responsibility and glance at me. They'd praise Melissa for trying and ignore the fact that I was the one paying for half their lives. Noah started asking to stay home more. "Do we have to go, Dad?" He'd say, "Quiet, not dramatic." And I'd say yes because I still wanted him to have grandparents. I still wanted him to feel like he had a bigger family. I kept thinking if I stayed calm, if I stayed generous, if I stayed present, they'd eventually treat him like he mattered. Christmas Eve proved they never planned to. That night, after Mom's announcement, Noah sat next to me in the living room while everyone else kept talking like nothing happened. He leaned his head against my arm. "Dad," he whispered, "did Grandma take my college money?" I looked at my kid's face, and I felt something snap. Quiet but final. "I'm going to fix it," I said. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. That question nearly broke me. "No," I said, steady. "You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you. This is about me letting people treat us like we don't matter." He nodded like he didn't fully understand, but he trusted the tone in my voice. When we got home, I put him to bed first. He fell asleep with his dinosaur blanket pulled up to his chin, and I stood in the doorway for a minute just watching him breathe. Then I went to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop again. I logged into the account. The number was exactly what Mom said it was. Exactly $18,000 gone. Not slowly, not over time. Gone in one transfer. The memo line said something cheerful, like it was a gift. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling heat behind my eyes, but I didn't cry. I took screenshots, timestamps, confirmation numbers, everything. Then I pulled up the account permissions and saw the truth. Mom wasn't just a trusted contact. She had been added as an authorized user, meaning she could move money, meaning she had access because I let her sit at my table and act like love was the same thing as entitlement. I didn't call her. I didn't yell. I opened a new checking account at my bank and moved every dollar that was mine out of any place my parents had ever touched. Then I called the bank's fraud line and started a formal dispute. The next morning, I went to the police station. The officer at the desk looked tired, like he'd seen every version of family drama. I handed him my folder, screenshots, statements, dates. He asked, "Do you know who did the transfer?" Yes, I said. My mother. She gave it to my sister. He paused. You want to file a report? Yes, I said. I want it documented. I want a case number. He looked at me like he expected a dramatic speech. I didn't give him one. At 11:03 a.m., my report was filed. I walked out of that station into cold air and felt weirdly calm, like I'd finally done the adult thing no one in my family ever did. I handled it. Noah's money wasn't a vague concept. It was real. It was protected. And it was stolen. By the time I got home, my mom was already calling. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, voice sweet and annoyed. Christopher, call me back. We need to talk about your little tantrum. Then Melissa texted, You're really doing this? I didn't respond. I called one more place instead. Melissa's car was in my name, not because I wanted it that way, because 3 years earlier she'd had bad credit, and Mom begged me to help. She needs a reliable car, Mom said. Just put it under you. She'll make the payments. Melissa made 2 payments. Then she stopped. Then she cried. Then Mom said, Well, we can't let her lose her car. So I paid, again and again, quietly, because I didn't want Noah to see his dad fighting with Grandma over money. But that car wasn't Melissa's. Not legally. It was mine. I called the lender. I asked what my options were. I provided the documentation. I requested repossession. The woman on the phone didn't care about my family's feelings. She cared about paperwork. Within an hour, it was scheduled. By noon, Melissa's car was being towed, and suddenly my phone turned into a siren. Mom called 8 times. Dad called twice. My aunt texted, What is wrong with you? Melissa sent a voice note, screaming and crying, saying I was ruining her life. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and listened to it once. Then I deleted it. Noah came into the kitchen in his pajamas and asked, Are we going to Grandma's today? I looked at him and said, No. He hesitated. Did I do something? No, I said again. Grandma did. He nodded slowly and went back to the living room, and I watched him sit on the rug and start building something out of blocks, like he was trying to make sense of the world with his hands. That was my last straw, right there. Not the money, not the car. My kid still thinking he might be to blame. The calls kept coming, so I did the only thing that worked with my family. I sent one text. 1. Do not contact me about money again. The college fund was for Noah. It was stolen. I filed a police report. I'm done financing people who don't respect my child or me. Mom showed up at my house that afternoon anyway. She didn't knock like a normal person. She hit the doorbell 3 times in a row, like she was summoning staff. When I opened the door, she barged forward like she owned the entryway. Are you out of your mind? She snapped. You involved the police? I didn't move aside. I didn't invite her in. I documented theft, I said. That's what it was. Her eyes flashed. It was family. You stole from my son, I said. She scoffed. He's 8. He doesn't need it. That sentence was so cruel and casual that for a moment I couldn't even respond, like she'd just said she didn't like the weather. Then she pointed at me. You're being dramatic. Melissa needed a fresh start. You gave her Noah's money, I said. Still calm. Not yours. Not a fundraiser. Not a loan. You took it. Mom's voice rose. You make good money. You can replace it. I nodded slowly. I can, and I will. But not while you still have access to any part of my life. She stared at me. So what? You're cutting us off? I didn't flinch. Yes, she laughed, sharp. You can't cut your mother off. I already did, I said. Her mouth opened like she had 100 lines ready. Then Noah's voice floated from the hallway behind me. Dad? Mom's face softened instantly. Fake sweet, like she could flip a switch. Noah, sweetheart? No, I said, still not raising my voice. You don't get to sweet-talk him after what you did. Her face hardened again. Look at you, acting like some hero. You're teaching him to be ungrateful. I turned slightly and looked at Noah. Go back to the living room, buddy. Put your headphones on. He did it without arguing, and that quiet obedience made my chest ache. When he was out of earshot, I said, Here's how this goes. You are not on any accounts. You will not have access to anything. You will not ask me for money, and you will not speak to Noah like you get to decide what he deserves. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't sad tears. They were weapon tears. You're punishing me, she whispered. After everything I've done for you. I held the door open wider. You need to leave, I said. She stared at me like she couldn't believe I meant it. Then she walked out, slow, like she was waiting for me to chase her and apologize. I didn't. I closed the door. I locked it. I leaned my forehead against the wood for a second and breathed. Then I went back to the kitchen, opened my laptop again, and did the last clean move. I canceled every automatic payment I had set up for my parents. Their cable, their cell plan, the help subscription I'd been covering for years because Mom once cried about not understanding technology. I didn't do it with anger. I did it with the same calm I used at work when a spreadsheet didn't balance. Click. Confirm. Done. One financial boundary, clean and complete. I was no longer their backup bank. The aftermath was predictable. My dad sent a long message about respect and blood, and how disappointed he was. Melissa posted on social media about family betrayal and people who act rich but have no heart. My aunt called me vindictive. Mom left voicemails that bounced between rage and sobbing. One minute she was screaming, the next she was whispering, "Please don't do this to me." Not once did she say, "I'm sorry." Not once did she say, "I shouldn't have touched that money." Not once did she mention Noah's name like he mattered. A week later, Melissa showed up at my job. She didn't get past the front desk because I'd already told security I didn't want surprise visitors. But they called me and said, "Your sister is here. She's causing a scene." I walked out into the lobby. Melissa's eyes were red, but her posture was pure attitude. "You're embarrassing me," she hissed. I looked at her and said, "You embarrassed yourself." She stepped closer. "Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you overreacted. Tell them to drop the report." I kept my voice low. "Give the money back." She laughed like I was stupid. "It's gone. Then that's your problem," I said. "Not Noah's. Not mine." She leaned in. "Mom said you'd fold. She said you always fold." That one landed. Not because it hurt, because it clarified everything. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a pattern. I nodded. Not this time. Then I walked back through the security doors without another word. That night, Noah asked me why Grandma wasn't calling. I didn't dump adult details on him. I just said, "Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices. And sometimes you have to protect your home." He thought about it, then asked, "Are we still doing our hot cocoa movie night?" "Yes," I said. He smiled a small smile, and I realized how much peace mattered more than appearances. A few days after that, I got a notification from my bank. The fraud investigation was moving forward. Then another email. Then a call from a detective who asked me to confirm details. I answered every question calmly and clearly. Dates, amounts, access permissions. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't soften it either. It was theft. And because it was family, my mom assumed I wouldn't call it what it was. She assumed wrong. When the official letter came in the mail with the case number printed on top, I put it in a folder labeled Noah. Not revenge, protection. The quiet closure came on a random Saturday in late January. Snow had fallen the night before, and the neighborhood was still and bright. Noah and I were at the kitchen table. He was working on a school project, drawing a future plan poster. Most kids drew astronauts and firefighters. Noah drew a small house, a dog, and a stack of books. At the top he wrote, in careful block letters, College. He looked up at me. "Do you think I'll really go?" My chest tightened. "Yes," I said. "You will." He pointed at his drawing. "Even if Grandma was mean?" I swallowed, especially because of that. He nodded like that made sense, then went back to coloring. I went to the living room and looked at the corner where we used to keep the family photo shelf. I'd taken the pictures down the day Mom showed up and tried to steamroll my doorway. Now it was empty, so I filled it with something else. I printed a photo of Noah from his last school awards day. He was holding a certificate, smiling like he couldn't believe he earned it. I framed it and set it right in the center. Then I took a small envelope and slid it behind the frame. Inside was the first deposit slip for the new college account I'd opened after everything happened. It wasn't $18,000. It was $200. But it was clean. It was ours. No shared access. No trusted contact. No family permission. Just me and my son, and a future no one could steal with a smile. That evening, we made hot cocoa and watched a movie on the couch under the same blanket we always used. No missed calls. No guilt texts. No forced family performances. Just quiet. Noah leaned against me and said, half asleep, "I like when it's just us." I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Me too." And somewhere out there, my mom was probably still telling people I was dramatic. My sister was probably still calling herself a victim. But in my house, the only thing that mattered was this. My child wasn't going to grow up learning that love comes with a withdrawal slip. Not anymore.